I'm going to open companies' eyes to what somebody that maybe looks like me could potentially be going through on the quiet, and doesn't know how to use their voice to let them know that, I might need a bit more help.
Terri, welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I think we were just saying off recording that it felt more like a Monday today than Monday. So like,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
even though it's not Monday, I feel like it's been a Monday, but here we are and we're going to have a great chinwag all about disability, which I love. What a perfect way to spend my evening.
It makes sense.
So, my first question that I ask absolutely every single guest is, how do you refer to your disability?
It's somewhat like a superpower, to be completely honest with you.
Mhm.
I feel like it's almost pushed me to do things that I might not have done if I was quote unquote well.
Uh-huh. And I love that because I think what you've said in like it's been like a superpower, because I think sometimes we think about disability as and it can be portrayed as a very negative thing, but actually what you said about pushing it to do things that you never maybe would have thought of had you not had a diagnosis.
hmm
What type of things has it pushed you to do?
So I'm now an author, which
Hmm.
I would have had nothing to write about if the
Yeah.
diagnosis didn't come along. Um, I quit almost like a safety blanket off a job role,
Hmm.
to kind of venture out and start my own consultancy company. And I feel like I would have stayed quote unquote safe had it not
Yeah.
been for like that little additional part of me saying, no, do what makes sense to you. Like, do what actually makes your heart smile.
Oh, I love that. Do what makes your heart smile. Oh,
Brooke.
that really got me. Oh, I think that's so lovely. But actually, what you said about staying safe, I think is a really important like key, because we
hmm
do so many things to stay safe, don't we? Particularly around disability. But actually, what you've said is that it kind of gave you that almost that push to be unsafe, which is actually
Yeah.
kind of like crossing that boundary of kind of what you're told when you're diagnosed with a disability, that you should stay safe and you shouldn't, do this and you shouldn't do that, and make sure that you
hmm
always have your back and all that kind of stuff. But actually for you, it was complete opposite, which I think I love that, because it's taking what someone's telling you and then also being like a big F you to the system, which I just
Or
think,
literally that complete opposite. Like, I don't mind that I won't get sick pay. I'll be fine. I'll figure it out. But ultimately, I didn't want to stay in a space where I was unhappy and it was causing me more stress and it could have potentially
mhm,
flared up the illness that I have. So I said,
mhm.
no, bye. See you later.
Oh, I love that. And with your consultancy company, what is it that you consult on?
So everything from accessibility,
Mhm,
ensuring, for example, websites, companies, HR, talent acquisition staff are doing the right thing.
mhm,
For example, the hiring process, making sure that it is that it can also fit someone with a disability and they don't necessarily feel like they have to hide it. I've been
mhm,
creating work toolkits so that companies kind of now know how to deal with people more so with invisible disabilities. Because a
mhm,
lot of the time, if you don't present maybe in a wheelchair or with a walking aid, you're not really believed. So
mhm,
I've kind of gone in and said, I'm going to open companies' eyes to what somebody that maybe looks like me could potentially be
mhm.
going through on the quiet, and doesn't know how to use their voice to let them know that, I might need a bit more help.
Yeah. And I love that because it's taking, as you said, like with particularly with invisible disabilities. Now, I don't know what it's like to experience an invisible disability because my disability
hmm
is super physical. So it's usually like a point of conversation. As soon as I take a jacket off in a room, people suddenly notice. And
hmm
so there comes that point of it when you do have an invisible disability, like that disclosure, where it's
Yeah.
like, actually, like I won't necessarily function the same way, or hold on, like I need a bit more time and this is why. How was that experience first time round for you when you got a diagnosis?
Oh, it was crap. I'll never forget. I went to the doctors and I parked in a Blue Badge Bay, And I
Mm-hmm.
had this man try to do like a citizen's arrest on me because how dare you? And in my head, I was thinking, okay, but you're parked in a blue badge bay and you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I've taken up a space that you or your wife could have potentially had. And
Mm-hmm.
secondly, piss off because it's got nothing to do with you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why are you so close to me? Because personal space.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he felt that I needed to prove to him that, the blue badge belonged to me because I look fine. I was just like, that level of ignorance is what I'm trying to eradicate, whether
Mm-hmm.
it be in the workforce, whether it be in our communities, like however I'm able to do that, I will do that.
Yeah. And I think like what you said about someone trying to put like a citizen's arrest is hilarious.
Yeah,
Because
it
it
was so,
always
it's not
happens,
great.
doesn't it?
Yeah, I was just like,
Always
mind your
happens.
business. Please go along about your day. It's fine. It will
Mm-hmm.
be fine. I haven't taken a space that you might have needed. And to be completely honest with you, and I know this might sound a bit uncouth, but outside of the age, you would never have thought that they would have needed a blue badge bay anyway. So we're both in the same position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Literally that. Especially when it comes, I find this always happens around disabled bays and parking. So many people suddenly have a lot of gall and gumption and nerve to suddenly be like, "Oh,
Mhm.
you shouldn't be in that space." And I'm like, "But would you say that to me if I was walking around Sainsbury's?
Well, this is
Like,
it.
would you have the nerve to say that if I was just walking around Sainsbury's, like pushing my trolley? Would you come up to me and be like, "Oh, I don't think you're disabled"?
Most probably not. They would have minded their business, but there's something about a disabled bay that people just
Mm.
have to intervene if you don't fit what they believe a disability should look like.
And it's all about smashing through and crushing that mold. And that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what you do, which is amazing.
Yes.
When it comes to disability, and we've obviously spoken that at some point in your life you got a diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
what was it that led you to kind of unearth your diagnosis as such? Like, what was it that made you go to the doctor and be like, look, something's not 100% here and I'm not sure what it is?
It started off with pins and needles in the soles of my feet,
Oh,
and that
wow.
made no sense to me because pins and needles at best 15 seconds, and it's
Mm-hmm.
still very much an ouch moment. So I'm 9 years in with them, but I take medication to kind of take the top of the pain, so to speak. But it was
Mm-hmm.
that, and luckily I had a GP at the time that maybe wasn't so sure about what was going on with me.
Mm-hmm.
So because my younger brother has got MS, so I had already done a lot of research around the disease. No, I didn't think I had it, purely
Mm-hmm.
because they say it's not hereditary. However, some of the research, some of the symptoms I was getting, I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
these two things kind of tie in with each other.
Yeah.
But it was solely pins and needles, um, and it kind of just progressed from there.
So, with your diagnosis, and I find that when I speak to women, particularly about getting a diagnosis, they
Mhm.
always, I say always tentatively because it's not necessarily always, but it's a good like 9.5 out of 10 times.
Mhm.
Women face some form of like medical misogyny or not being believed, or you have to kind of jump through hoops to get to where you need to go. And I was just wondering,
Mhm.
was your experience as plain sailing, or was it actually you kind of had to jump through a couple of hoops to get to where you wanted to be with it?
So yeah, it definitely wasn't plain sailing at all.
Mm-hmm.
It took them a year to actually diagnose me. However, um, I found out that the hospital where I'd had all my MRIs done, they,
Mm-hmm.
for example, had all their reports written in the December.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't find out about my diagnosis until the March in a completely different hospital because I came down with the flu and the lower half of my body completely shut down.
Oh,
And yeah,
wow.
I was paralyzed. Um, and it took, even though it was hospital to hospital, it took about
Mm-hmm.
4 hours for them to get the reports, for them to get the MRIs, because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately the initial hospital knew that they had kind of effed up. Um, and they weren't really willing to disclose the information that they had found from the MRIs and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's been a journey. It's
Mm-hmm.
genuinely been a journey. And I feel like that's even why I started the charity, purely because I
Yeah.
don't necessarily want other people to have that experience.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just here like When it comes to diagnosis, and I know I've just said this, but it never
Hmm.
fails to shock me that there
Hmm.
seems to be so many hoops to jump through. And in particular, like never on like our end as individuals, because we know we're going to a doctor for a reason, and there's a reason you're
Of
turning
course.
up there, and there's a reason that you're chasing answers because you feel like something isn't quite right and something's, not quite sitting well in your body. But the fact that they had your diagnosis on like a written report, a piece of
Yeah.
paper in December, and then it wasn't until March that you then found out is absolutely astounding, because
Yeah.
that information should have then been passed like your GP or like whoever, like like the next person down who should have told you,
Of
or that
course.
person should have rang you and been like, hey, this is what we've just found,
Yeah.
this is something that we're looking into, and that just didn't happen.
It didn't happen. So I was supposed to have an appointment in the middle of January. But
Hmm.
they did reassure me that, if they found anything, they'll call me, they'll let me know. Obviously, they
Hmm.
didn't. They cancelled the appointment on the day of the appointment. And when I did actually go to the follow up appointment, it was purely because the person that was supposed to let me know, apparently they had come down with a cold. But in my head, I was like, listen, the cleaner could have told me. I would not
Hmm.
have cared who let me know. But I feel like if I'd known about my diagnosis then, when I'd caught the flu, I might have, I don't know, I might not have gone to work. Instead of like eating satsumas at
Hmm.
my desk, I would have maybe stayed at home. But being the busybody that I am, I still went in.
Yeah. And like, I love what you say about, maybe I would have done something different because I would have
Yeah,
known that there's like, something's underlying, not that they're necessarily linked, or maybe they are linked, but I would have maybe approached things differently. But the
of course.
fact that I wasn't given that information, therefore means I couldn't take the actions that I probably should have done.
Yeah, the options to almost not allow or not get as far as I did, like prior to diagnosis, it was taken away from me.
Yeah. And that is what kills me, because that should never have happened.
Not at all.
When it comes to MS, and obviously you said that like the pins and needles are the things that were what made you want to seek out a diagnosis. What are
Hmm.
some of the other symptoms of MS? As someone that my knowledge of MS is very, very limited, I always thought it was to do with muscle, but that could be
Yeah,
really wrong.
no, it is to do with muscles. So,
Hmm.
um, the most layman terms for me to put it, if you stop using the muscle, the MS will
Hmm.
say, no problem, you don't want it, I'll take your ability to use it away.
Uh-huh.
And in hindsight, that's what happens to people from time to time. So
Hmm.
they do encourage people to be as active as humanly possible. However, that's not always the case, especially if maybe
Hmm.
you're in a wheelchair, or if you're like myself, where you're in pain 24 hours a day, even though I
Hmm.
know I should try to get to the gym, but that's a different
Hmm.
subject. But yeah, I'm working on it. I pay for it, if that helps.
Look, that's the
Um,
main thing. It comes out of the account. Like, who
exactly.
is
I see
Jim?
it. But yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one because there are
Hmm.
so many symptoms.
Yeah.
There are four types of MS, and ultimately, no two people have the same experience.
Uh-huh.
So, like for example, me and my brother, we both have MS, but we don't have the same experiences. We don't have the same symptoms. Maybe similar, but never the
Hmm.
same. Even though we've got the same mum and same dad.
Yeah. Wow. So it's literally like, and as is all disability, right? Is that it's
Hmm.
very individual to the individual person. But actually, even when it comes down to symptoms of MS, they're completely individual, and your experience of it could be, like you said, like woefully different from somebody else.
Yeah, yeah, definitely
Wow.
can be.
Oh my goodness. Like, oh, that there's so much information in that it must be so
Hmm.
like tricky to pin down, is what I mean, but not
Yeah.
necessarily how to phrase it, because I think all disabilities are difficult, right? But particularly when
Hmm.
a disability is so individual to the individual person, and the symptoms and the experiences. I mean, like maybe there are some similar ones along the way,
Yeah.
but if you're experiencing something that's completely different from somebody else, that's not like nowhere near the same remit, but
Hmm.
you could still have MS, it must be so wild, like a wild journey is what I'm picturing.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think so even when it started as just a platform, for example, I
Hmm.
always refer to it as a like a big brother, big sister, so that people could kind of buddy up and maybe
Yeah.
talk to somebody that's got similar symptoms or taking similar
Hmm.
medications, just so they could kind of feel less alone. because I
Yeah.
remember when my brother got diagnosed, that element of isolation, especially as a young black man, what, nearly 15
Hmm.
years ago, he didn't have anybody with the same diagnosis that looked like him that he felt like he could relate to.
Yeah.
So I always made sure like that was one of the main things for the community, like that, you are able to find someone that not only just looks like you, but is understanding of what you're going
Hmm.
through, and not
Yeah.
necessarily just that, oh, you'll be okay soon, because guess what, guys, I won't be. No, I've kind of got this for life until they
Yeah.
find a cure. So it's fine. You don't
Like,
have
this
to
is
give me that
me
toxic positivity.
forever now.
Well, this is it, and I'm fine with that.
Hmm.
It's not a
Yeah.
problem whatsoever. But yeah, it was almost that, helping to kind of rid a little bit of isolation
Hmm.
one day at a time.
Yeah. And that is so important, particularly what you said about your brother not being able to see someone who looked like him, or even to the
Yeah.
same point kind of sounded like him, with like
Hmm.
medication and what he was taking and what he was doing and what he was feeling. And that is so important, because disability, like my viewpoints of how we have such a lack of representation, is that disability got so swept under the rug for so
Yeah.
long, right? And then all of a sudden disabled people are on TV, and maybe it's like 1 in every 100 you see a disabled person, but that disabled person is
Exactly.
incredibly specific to an incredibly
Hmm.
specific disability. 9 times out
Yeah.
of 10 there's some form of mobility aid. 9 times out of 10 it's probably a wheelchair user. Nine
Yeah.
times out of 10 they're probably white, and 9 times out of
Yes.
10 they're probably female, because 9 times out of 10 when we look at men who are disabled, we usually think immediately war. These
Yeah.
are my personal view findings anyway. So to be able to like become that representation is so valuable, because that is just not what disability looks like for everyone at all.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it was about a year, maybe 2 years ago, I was in a
Hmm.
headspace like, create the change you want to see. So instead of,
Yeah.
me maybe going to war and kicking down the door because I don't see maybe a black woman or a woman of color being
Hmm.
represented on the TV or in the newspaper or in the magazine, I'm going to be that person.
Yeah.
And I know I had to be in some uncomfortable spaces,
Hmm.
but it's paid off because, hi, Brooke, we're having a conversation now.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it was just also to show other people that you can be that face as well. Like,
Hmm.
you can see other people that look like you represented in the media, because that is so important. I feel like culturally, a lot of people maybe hide their disability because they
Hmm.
don't see others that look like them.
Yeah. And that right there, I think, is so true. So true. Because I think so many people don't realize that they could even class themselves as disabled, or they
Hmm.
don't feel like they're like quote unquote disabled enough. I think that's so
Yeah.
true, particularly surrounding representation. And there was something that you said about being in uncomfortable situations and having uncomfortable
Yes.
conversations. And I'm such a big believer of having the uncomfortable conversation, because I think
Hmm.
if we don't have the uncomfortable conversation, we don't grow. And like, it's
Yes.
called growing pains for a reason. And
Hmm.
like, it's not meant to necessarily be the most comfortable thing to talk about disability, and have these conversations when you're like, actually, you are part of the problem. I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily having a go at you, but I'm actually saying to you, you are part of the problem, and this is how we can kind of move forward and fix it. But maybe you need to take a little bit of accountability for the role that you have played in this situation. And that can
Mm.
be painfully uncomfortable for anyone.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Accountability is not always on the top of people's wish list. So it doesn't always, bring forth a conversation that they even want to continue. But to your point, it's
Hmm.
definitely an important one.
Yeah. When you first like were delving into your new career, doing your
Hmm.
consultancy, and when you went into places to talk to them about disability, have you ever faced kickback from them, and had that conversation where they're like, no, I don't think you're right, or I don't think we're in the wrong, or not necessarily
Oh
even in the
God.
wrong? Really?
Yeah. So I done a workshop for the Home Office,
Hmm.
and it was actually going quite swimmingly.
Hmm.
And then we were speaking about um, more spectrum based disabilities.
Yeah.
And I received a feedback email after the fact, and a lady basically said like it was so overwhelming, and she basically said that what I referred to, I feel like it was ADHD as, was incorrect. Now, obviously, before you go and do
Mm-hmm.
these things, you have to fact check and fact check again.
Yeah.
Um, but I was also very aware that she was very early into her diagnosis and maybe still getting used to her diagnosis. So one thing I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to do was a back and forth. I don't need to be correct. In that moment, if this is
Mm-hmm.
what you prefer for it to be referred as, that's what we're going to do. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was different because in my head I thought, oh, okay, I haven't had this before.
Yeah.
But I'm also very aware that you can't choose how people feel towards a
Mm-hmm.
situation. And like I said, especially
Yeah.
with her being quite early into her diagnosis, I had to give her grace because it was understanding you're in a daunting situation. I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
8 years in, and still sometimes I'm like, oh, is this really happening to me? Like, is this really my life now? So I
Yeah.
get it. I understood.
Yeah. I love what you said there about I didn't have to be like in that moment in time, I didn't have to be correct.
No,
And that takes such a big that takes a big person to be able to say, do you know what, like this situation, I don't have to be the one in the right because something
hmm
is going on for you and you need to express
yeah,
that. I don't need to be the person who is absolutely factually correct on this point in time. You do you,
yeah,
I'll
no.
do me. But actually, at some point in time, you'll come across the bridge and realize that maybe I was right in a
Well, this
couple
is
of months'
it.
time.
Exactly that. So I
Yeah.
kind of just left it, but I think that was like the first time where I ever received, I don't want to call it negative,
Hmm.
but I definitely looked at it and I thought, okay, this battle isn't for me.
Yeah.
I'll
And
just
that's it,
continue.
right? Like particularly for disabled women, like picking your battles is like a skill set that you kind of have to pretty quickly
Yeah,
learn.
yeah, definitely. Especially as like sometimes, especially when I am leading these workshops, it's
Hmm.
not that I forget I have a disability, but it's not personal. I can't allow it to be personal.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That though, again, like it's not personal. Like I'm
hmm
sharing, I'm sharing the information. I'm giving you guys what
Yeah.
you've asked for in terms of like why I'm here. But actually,
hmm
it's not a personal thing if you're coming for me about
Yeah.
this.
Exactly that.
Oh, I honestly, these conversations fill my heart full because I always feel like I learn something new off other people.
I love that.
But with everything that you've been through when it comes to diagnosis, setting up your own business, all of that kind of stuff, is there a piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
Um, I feel like I would say continue giving yourself the chance to be great. Purely because I feel like I got stagnant. Like I had my son when
Hmm.
I was 21 and I kind of fell into that comfort blanket of employment and I stayed there for a really long time. So
Hmm.
kind of believe in yourself, give yourself the chance to be great, like understand your potential. And if you haven't found it yet, go looking for it. Because I feel like that is one of the most important things.
I love that. Like, give yourself the chance to be great. Like, so that's so,
Yeah.
it is really powerful because it's not believe in yourself. It's literally give yourself room to go
hmm
and explore what you're great at because sometimes
Yeah.
we don't necessarily give ourselves that space.
No, we don't.
And actually, oh my god, I couldn't love that more. Give yourself a chance to be great. Like if
Yeah.
you don't if people aren't or like whoever listened, I hope that whoever's listening to this takes that and really runs with it because I think that's such a valuable piece of advice for anyone, disabled or not, because
hmm
very, very rarely do we allow ourselves the time and the space to sit back and be like, actually, what am I good at? Because saying that you're good at something can often be quite uncomfortable because we're brought up in
hmm
a society where you're not meant to celebrate yourself. But
Exactly.
actually, we should.
Without a doubt. We definitely should.
Yeah. And like being able to sit back and be like, do you know what I'm really good at? I could do this and I could become great
hmm
at it. Like that is valuable as I'm not going to say what I was going to say, but it rhymes with
You want
duck.
to swear, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Oh, that's funny. Interestingly, as we've just been talking about trying to notice, like, you know, we don't always give ourselves room to notice the positive traits that we
hmm
have within us. Is there a positive trait that you've noticed, particularly in setting up your own business, in your diagnosis journey, that you've noticed within yourself that actually you're really proud of?
I am more patient than I ever thought was possible. I think dealing with some of these medical professionals, and
Mm-hmm.
even them, even having to strong arm them to kind of get what I need, because in hindsight, lived experience,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of know sometimes a bit more than the medical professionals that are looking at Google or are
Yeah.
reading from a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think patience is has been the biggest thing. Like, even with, yes, the consultancy company, I come across a lot of different characters, but
Mm-hmm.
even the charity, for example, I a lot of the time I feel like people also forget that I have the same diagnosis that the charity is based around.
Yeah.
And having to deal with different types of characters, sometimes quite entitled. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, and breathe, kind of thing, because what is
Mm-hmm.
really going on here? But
Mm-hmm.
patience definitely has been like the biggest thing for me.
I think I need to learn from you because I'm actually a really impatient person. And like, I get really upset if I send an email and it wasn't responded to yesterday. So maybe,
That's so funny.
maybe I need to take like a little moment of that and be like, actually, I need to learn bit more
Just a
patience.
little bit.
Do you know what it is? I just love getting stuff done. And when I feel
Hmm.
like, and I'm sure you'll understand this as well, because you're quite go, go, go like myself, is that when I'm
Hmm.
on that roll and things are like flowing and I'm like in such a good work mode, if the reason that my work mode stops is because I need a piece of information that I'm relying on someone else to give me, it's almost like I get
Yeah.
a little bit frustrated and I'm like, come
Oh, most
on, like
definitely.
this could be going a
Hurry
bit
up.
quicker. Like,
No, definitely, I get that. But then at the same time, I'm just like, I'm sure there's something else I can do, because to your point, there is always something. So if the
mhm,
buck stops or we've got a little blocker there, let's move on
mhm.
to the next thing.
Yeah, love that. Absolutely love that. With your charity, was setting up a charity difficult? Because I'm always so intrigued to know how charities work.
That was the longest 4.5 months of my life.
Hmm.
Now, I'm a bit of an extrovert. I could have gone down the CIC route and,
Hmm.
maybe gotten it back in a week and a half. However, to be able to boast that I'm one of two black led multiple sclerosis based charities in the UK, Scotland, and Ireland, it hits
Hmm.
different.
Yeah,
It really does.
sing it louder.
Literally. So yeah, I did go down the uncomfortable route of starting a
Hmm.
charity. There was a lot of legalities involved.
Hmm.
And like, to this very day, there's always a lot of different things that I'm having to do and I'm learning on the job. But
Yeah,
I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it for the world. I love it.
I just, I always look at like, particularly when it comes to like grassroots charities and think, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, the work that goes into that
Yes.
you don't see behind the like behind doors is absolutely
Yeah.
phenomenal because it's literally nonstop all day, every day.
All day. You see a social media post, but behind closed doors, I might even be shedding a tear because it can get very heavy. But
Yeah.
I do love it. I do enjoy it, and I feel like I didn't do it just for me. Like, I did
Hmm.
it for the people that look like me. I did it for my brother. In
Yeah.
hindsight, like, he was always my why. So
Hmm.
yeah, I
And
wouldn't change
so,
it for the world.
your charity, is this the one that kind of buddies people up with MS?
Yes, talks with MS. Yes.
So, tell me a bit more about how what it does and how it works.
So it is a big brother stroke big sister charity,
Hmm.
and it kind of enables people to link up with people that know exactly what they're going through.
Hmm.
And that can be done via events. I call them experiences
Yeah.
because I try my hardest to get some of the best sponsors the
Hmm.
UK has to offer. So, for example, we had our charity launch, and that was sponsored by Wingstop. And they are a multi-billion-pound chicken company.
Oh
And
my
it was
god,
amazing.
obsessed.
Right.
Obsessed. I honestly think I could win wing eating competitions all around the world.
No way.
Like genuinely. So this is complete. So I'm so sorry. I'm completely taking this. I
No,
once
that's fine.
entered. I once entered a wing eating contest, thinking that I was like a big dog, and I got humbled very, very quickly. But I had the determination, and I was very ill afterwards. But oh my god, best wings in the
Oh
world.
my
I'm a
gosh.
wing gal. Oh my god, I'm
Yeah.
obsessed.
So yeah, I try my hardest to partner with some of the better companies,
Hmm.
just so that people come to my events. They're fully accessible. Venues are all accessible, but just so they can see that even with their diagnosis, they can still have a fun time. Like, whether it's a cocktail
Yeah.
in a pineapple, whether it's
Hmm.
it's wings and who knows, and fries or what have you. they're coming out their house, because I feel like that's a
Yeah.
big deal, especially for people with disabilities. They're coming out of their house, they're meeting like-minded people, people that genuinely know what they're going through, and
Mm-hmm.
they're having a good time on the back of that. And they're maybe taking a selfie or two.
Yeah.
We do webinars whereby we either get medical professionals in, or not too long ago we had someone coming from the DVLA just to kind
Oh,
of speak through.
amazing.
Right, just to kind of speak through what it looks like if you have a license, or if you're looking to get a license
Mm-hmm.
and you now have a disability. So we do have informative subjects in our webinars, and we have our WhatsApp group. And we don't really talk about MS in the WhatsApp group. 9 times out of 10, it's what song are you listening to this week, or what's happening in
Mm-hmm.
your world. Because
Yeah.
outside of MS, there is still life. There was life
Mm-hmm.
before MS, and there'll be life after MS. So from the webinars, our experiences, or events, um,
Mm-hmm.
and our different social channels, we just kind of have a good time, remind people that yes, you have MS, but that cliche line, but MS doesn't have you.
Oh, I love that. And I
Oh, you
also
love
love
it.
that it's about experience as well. It's not just like an
Yes.
event, because actually I always think the best gifts that you can give people, like Christmas and whatever, is always an experience based gift, because I'd rather
Hmm.
you go and experience something and feel something than me giving you a candle. And so actually to
Hmm.
be able to provide that space for people, and as you're right, like get out the house and have fun, maybe doing something a bit different, is kind of
Hmm.
invaluable.
Definitely. It definitely is. And it makes a difference. It can make a difference to your whole week. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily get like adult communication, because they could be at home living by themselves. So they just feel like a
Yeah.
burden to maybe their friends and family. So they kind of keep it locked up. So the
Mm-hmm.
fact that I can get them out in a venue where they feel safe enough to maybe use a toilet that could be wide enough for their wheelchair or their walking aid,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a massive deal. And I really enjoy how, like, it's the big companies, the ones that you want, that have
Hmm.
like fun attached to them, or like it's
Oh,
something, it's
definitely.
not just this like, we're a disabled charity, we're talking about disability, so therefore we're going to be sponsored by all of the disabled charity, like other
Oh
companies
no.
in the UK. Because actually,
Oh no.
like,
You're gonna.
a lot of people don't always understand that that's not always the best thing for the disabled community, because then
Hmm.
it becomes insular, and it's not about being, the events then become about being a community of people who almost are closed off. Whereas actually, if you're going
Hmm.
after big companies, you're talking to big companies, you're having these different conversations, it makes it way more normalized than not.
Without a doubt. And 9 times out of 10, when I approach them, I'm just like, I'm trying to diversify your company. Work with me here. Like,
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
makes sense to you. You might not realize it yet, but it makes sense, because the
Hmm.
coverage that you'll get from being part of the experience in itself, um, is a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, things that I'm learning this evening. Honestly, I love it when I get to fill my brain with knowledge of things that I don't necessarily know about, but being able to ask the questions is the most
Hmm.
important thing in the world.
Yeah.
When it comes to MS, there was something that you said about life before MS and then there'll be life after MS. And I was
Yes.
wondering, with having a diagnosis, was there ever a
Hmm.
grieving period of life that you thought that you would have, and then life that changed when you got a diagnosis?
Um, I would have loved for there to be a real grieving period,
Hmm.
but I don't think there was. And that's because I kind of went in like head on,
Yeah.
wanting to build this platform, wanting to
Hmm.
help other people. I feel like because I saw my brother's diagnosis like firsthand,
Hmm.
I didn't feel it didn't feel as I don't know, I didn't feel as though I didn't know what to expect, even though our symptoms were
Yeah.
so different, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
But then at the same time, I never thought I was going to be paralyzed. I'll be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
I never thought that I'd be going to work one day and everything be a okay.
Hmm.
And then the following week, I don't know if I need to go to the toilet or not. So I don't feel like I had enough time to grieve. But
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe pushing the charity, pushing the platform, and helping others kind of helped me as well.
Yeah, and I think that like diving in almost removes that time aspect, doesn't it? Because you're like,
Hmm.
actually, like I've now got it's almost like I've now got a mission and I'm going to go and achieve it. And actually what
Exactly.
comes next is going to be a journey, and whatever journey it is, I'm going to go on it. But actually we've got to push forward because there's something that I really want to strive for here.
Hmm.
Oh,
Exactly that.
yeah. And I think that is actually such a great way to deal with things. Like, I'm a big believer of get busy when you're grieving, or get busy when you're sad, because you'll take your mind away from it. So I can really relate to that,
Internet's gone.
like go after it energy. And I love that. So when it comes to disability, I think it's always really funny to talk about the weird questions that you get.
Okay.
So I always get asked if like a shark has bitten my arm off, or like
What?
just really random things like that.
Oh my god. A shark. If a
Yeah, no,
shark
I'm
is
being
bitten
like
your
deadly
arm off.
serious.
Okay.
Yeah. Used to get it a lot when I was a child. People were like, "Oh my god, did a shark bite your arm off?" And I'd be like, "No, we
Wow.
live in England. Like,
There's no
England
shark.
is an island, and there's no sharks. And if it did happen that way, I'm pretty sure it'd be on front page news. And my face
Honestly,
definitely has not been on front page news."
yet it will be there soon.
Exactly. I like that. Yeah, I love that. But I was wondering, with your disability, have
Mhm.
you ever had like weird questions that people have felt like it's okay to ask you?
Um, Not necessarily a weird question, but I did have someone with MS tell me that I'm
Hmm.
not disabled enough to class myself as disabled, and I was like, no problem, that's fine. Next, kind of thing. Because why? Why?
I love how both of us pulled like the same face. We were like, "What?
Yeah,
Like, what?
exactly.
Where did that come from?"
Yeah, and I think
And
I
that's
don't have any qualms with highlighting the fact that I've got a disability. Like, it doesn't bother me.
mhm.
So for the simple fact that you
Yeah.
took time out of your day to send me a message, what response did you want from me, babe? Like, what did you really want me to say?
Hmm. The fact that you took time out of your day to type me a message that tells me that I'm not disabled, because that's how you perceive
Yeah,
the disability that we both
we
have.
both have, and that level of ignorance, I have no time for it. But
Mhm.
outside of that, I feel like people almost forget that there's something going on with me until maybe a
Mhm.
situation happens, or I'm just like, I'm not doing it. Like, I'm bowing out gracefully, kind of thing. But outside of that, I don't
Yeah.
really think that I've encountered anything to that magnitude. It's always been
But
okay.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah. Always been like manageable, where you're a bit like taken aback, but actually you're like,
Yeah.
okay, like let you have your moment.
Yeah. Nothing where I'm just like, oh, please never talk to me again. It's more so, okay, well, it's like that lady, for example. I feel sorry for you, babe, because that level of
Yeah.
ignorance, like, we're both on the same journey. Our journeys may look different,
Mhm.
but it's still the same journey. We've still got the same thing on paper.
Yeah, exactly that. You're literally like, okay, well, see you in a couple of months' time.
Yeah, like as you were, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I have really enjoyed having this conversation with you, because I think, as I've said to you, I think what you say stands for so much more than just the disabled community, and
Mhm.
just you, like even just your MS community, because I think what you've built is really important. And I love that it's about representation and
Yeah,
experience, and actually having something that doesn't necessarily take your mind off your disability, but it can take you away and let you know that yes, you're disabled, but you can also have good experiences. Because
100%.
this idea that disability goes hand in hand with like not a great life is actually really uninspiring, and
Hmm.
you're changing that narrative, and I love that. But my final question for you is, Terry, are you disabled and proud?
I definitely am. It's changed a lot in my life. So, yeah, without a
Hmm.
shadow of a doubt.
Amazing. I have to say, like, I've already said it loads of times already, but I really, really enjoyed this conversation, particularly what you've said, like all surrounding representation and taking chances, and
Hmm.
actually, letting your disability mean something more than just like, oh, I'm disabled now, and actually it becoming your mission. I think it's been
Hmm.
so valuable.
But I
So
think, even
where
in
can
terms,
we find?
sorry,
Oh, sorry, girl, you go.
no, I was going to say, like, in terms of the representation, because I've seen communities where unless you're of a particular heritage, for example, you can't be involved.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been of the opinion that it's diversity and inclusion, but ensure that you include me too, because I feel like that has always been part of the problem. So yes, the representation, because I'm a black
Mm-hmm.
woman and I love the skin I'm in, and we are open for everyone. However, we do have
Mm-hmm.
that like amplification on, you know, the black and brown community.
Yeah. And I think it's so, like, that in itself is so important. It's like, this is for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but actually these are the voices that we're going to amplify, but you're still welcome here.
100%.
And that goes back to that, like, just shining a light that actually disability is not one size fits all,
No.
and it's not like this, like, what's the word I was looking for? Monolith. That's the word I was looking for. It's not just this like one monolith that everything's going to look the same and be the same. And I just think that that's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But if we want to find out more about your charity and about your consultancy services, where do we go?
So I am Talks with MS on all social media platforms, or www.talkswithms.co.uk. In terms of the consultancy, I don't have social media for that at the moment. It is a lot of word of mouth and LinkedIn, but
Mm-hmm.
TLJ Consulting Services, or just Google me. Google me.
I love that. Terri, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to chat with me.
No
I've
problem.
honestly had such a great chinwag, and I just feel like we've now become really good mates, and I love
Yeah,
it.
good mate. Yeah, it's
Amazing.
been
Thank you
fun.
so much for being on the pod.
Thank you so much for having me, Brooke.